Hi everybody, I hope that you're all doing well, and right now I feel like it's really important to tell you that even though we are very, very fancy up top, we're in my nice little autumnal celebration dress, which has had no outings this year because obvious reasons, despite the fact that we're looking like this on top, I am wearing joggers on the bottom. I just can't lie to you, I'm just gonna have to pop the bubble and burst the illusion of fanciness. But the reason that we are all fancy on top is that I am doing my 1K Q&A, woo! So as you know, last week I reached 1,000 subscribers on YouTube, which I was so excited for. So I put out a little video asking for different questions to do for a Q&A. I'm really excited for this because whilst I have done tag videos before, so I have answered different questions, I've never had them personally tailored to me, so it's quite exciting. First off, we have a question from Susan Roberts, which I'm not gonna lie to you, had nobody asked this, I probably would have submitted it to myself because it is a question that's popped up a few times and I think does need answering, and it is. Congratulations, Charlotte. I must ask though, what is Coynie? Is that your last name? How on earth do you pronounce it? Shouldn't your channel be Charlotte Reads? And yeah, good point. So my channel name is Coiny Reads. Coiny Reads. I know that when a few people have spoken about my channel, this is something that's kind of stumbled them up, is how on earth do you pronounce that? I've had a few Connies, I've had a few Conies, I've had a couple of people messaging me before they've talked about me in a video to be like, hey, how do I pronounce your name? And it's something I probably should have seen coming but didn't, because of course my name is Charlotte, not Coiny. It is not an actual name, it is a nickname. Coiny is actually my nickname from secondary school. My last name is Coyne, it is an Irish name, C-O-Y-N-E, and Coiny basically derives from the fact that when I was in my very first PE class in year 7, our PE teacher went down a line, asked for all of our names and gave us nicknames, and Coiny was the name that he gave to me. And like a lot of high school nicknames, I think, it was a nickname that I was kind of resistant to at first. I think the fact that I was resistant to it was the reason why a lot of my friends were just like, haha, we're gonna call you that anyway. But then over time it grew on me, and that's basically what a lot of my friends from secondary school call me. It's not a name that I ever introduced myself as. I very much am like, hi, I'm Charlotte, not hi, I'm Coiny, because that doesn't make any sense to people. But it's a nickname that's just grown on me, so I like to use it in social media. Initially, when I was thinking about names for my YouTube channel, I was thinking about things that included Charlotte. I think at one point I thought of something like Bookishly Charlotte, which I thought was a little bit twee. I also for a while was really considering Charlotte, so like Char and then lit, Charlotte. But for whatever reason, I just didn't feel like it suited me, and Charlotte Reads just felt a little bit too boring. So eventually I just settled on Coiny Reads, and it felt very natural to me. I didn't think anything of it. I think I honestly kind of forgot that if people ever talk about my channel, they would actually have to mention my channel name, and I just don't think it crossed my mind that people might have an issue with this word that is not an actual word. But yes, just to summarise, Coiny Reads. So thank you, Susan, for that question. Next up, I got a few questions from Shah over at Thoroughly Enjoyed Books. First off, she asks, is there a video idea you really want to make, but whenever you try it, it just doesn't turn out well? There are no videos that come to mind where I've got in front of the camera and every single time I've just been like, no, because I am quite a stubborn person. If I get in front of a camera and I've started filming a video, I'm gonna see it through. However, there are definitely some videos that have been very much stuck in the planning stages for a very long time, and some of which I don't think are gonna get there. I know I keep on talking about my university video where I talk about the different things that I read during university, the different modules that I studied. It's a video that I really want to make. However, I do know that it's gonna take a while. I am very prone to rambling on and on, and I feel like for 4 years of university, it's gonna be a lot. It's one that I want to put research into. It's one that I definitely want to script because, like I say, I do have a tendency to ramble on, and I want to be able to consolidate my thoughts before I stand in front of a camera and start rambling. However, the video that has very much been relegated to development hell is a video that I talked about possibly doing about April, May time, which is a video about Shakespeare's play Coriolanus. Basically, I read that play and I watched the Tom Hiddleston version of it back in May, and I really enjoyed it, and especially that production just launched a lot of different thoughts, particularly thinking about Coriolanus as a character who his main flaw is not that he is too proud, but rather that he's just a bit shy and he's suddenly been thrust into this position that he's not really well suited for, that he definitely believes in his cause and that he is a competent general, but he's just not very good with people, and that's where he fails. Rather than thinking of the historical context for what's going on, trying to draw out a way of interpreting Coriolanus that really fits into problems that normal people would have, because whilst there is a lot of historical context for Shakespeare's plays and definitely a historical interpretation, I do think that Shakespeare definitely writes with his audience in mind, not just with lessons for people who are in similar positions like kings. And it was a video that I was really interested in doing, but I know that I am no expert on Shakespeare, and I feel like if I were to stand in front of a camera and talk about Shakespeare and then upload it, I probably would be hit with a lot of people being like, you don't know what you're talking about, because it is so personal to people and it is all up to different people's interpretations. And people people do get really, really protective of Shakespeare and their own personal interpretations, and I don't want to tread on people's toes when I know that I'm not an expert. So yeah, that's definitely a video that I've wanted to make but have felt a little bit wary of. Shah also asked, which booktubers do you think have the most similar reading taste to you? Whilst there definitely isn't a booktuber who I think I perfectly match in terms of my reading taste, there are definitely a few where I'm like, yeah, I think if that person likes that, then I'm probably gonna like that too. I think Jennifer Brooks is definitely somebody that whenever she recommends a book, especially when she explains why it is that she liked or disliked a particular book, I always feel like, that's interesting. I think I might want to pick that up. In her October wrap-up, what was it? The really popular book, like The Secret Life of Addie LaRue? I don't know. But she was talking about it, and it was a book that I knew had a lot of hype about it, but was not one that I had really considered because I thought, it looks just kind of like your typical like fantasy-ish YA thing, I don't know. And then she described it and I was like, oh, that might be something that kind of crosses the bridge for me. It has a bit of like magical realism in it, but also like has that historical aspect that might bridge the gap for me. And she said, yeah, I thought the same kind of thing too, but I think it just kind of matches both of our like brands of weird. And I really like that expression, our mutual brands of weird. I also think of Claire Fenby whenever I think of this question. I definitely think we have mutual interest in like history and also in classics. And then the final question from Shah is, what is your favourite book that you read because of Booktube? And oh gosh, there's a lot. I feel like in terms of just this year, there have been a lot. So things like Mr. Loverman by Bernardine Evaristo, I probably wouldn't have read without hearing so many positive, glowing things about it on Booktube. I think My Dog Vanessa is another one of those ones that I probably wouldn't have given it a second glance had I seen it in a bookshop, but because I'd heard so many people saying how fantastic it is, I gave it a go and I'm so glad that I did. However, I think if I have to really whittle it down and go for a book that I would not have picked up without Booktube but has now become like top tier, favourite of favourites, I think it would be When I Hit You by Mina Kandasamy. And this is a book that I picked up particularly after hearing Jennifer from Insert Literary Pun here really highly praising. And yes, I am still fuming about the fact that this didn't win the Women's Prize because deserve better. Melina Reeds asks, is there a historical period you would like to learn more about? And the answer to that is all of them. I think in terms of British history, I'm getting more and more interested in medieval, whereas I used to not touch it at all. I think when I'm thinking about the gaps in my knowledge when it comes to English history, definitely like there's a few centuries in the high medieval period, so like around about 1200 to 1400 that I'm a little shaky on. And by a little shaky, I mean a lot of shaky, I don't know. I'd like to learn more about ancient civilizations, particularly stuff that is outside of mythology. And we better not get started on like world history that I don't know about because we'll be here a while. Most of my historical knowledge does definitely come from the country that I live in, which is England. So I definitely need to expand my horizons beyond that. Melina also asks, what unread book has been on your shelves the longest? And let me have a look. As I said in the past, I do like to keep my TBR somewhat small, which is something that is not working right now. I have like about 30 unread books right now, which is a lot for me. But I am quite pleased to say that all of the books that are on my unread pile do not predate this year, so that's really good. And in fact, there is only one book that predates lockdown, and that is this, which is War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy, or Lev Tolstoy. I kind of bat between the two. This was a gift for my birthday this year from my friend Lizzie. Thank you, Lizzie. I'm just sorry that it's taken me so long to read this. But I think we can kind of see the reason why this hasn't been read yet. And then finally, Melina asks, a biography that I would recommend. I mean, it was always going to be this, wasn't it? My friend Rachel asks, what is your favourite waterfowl? Which, if you are not a University of York student, will probably mean nothing to you. However, if you are from York, you will know that the wildlife, the nature at University of York is astounding. And despite the fact that I did spend 4 years in York, I'm definitely no expert in the different varieties of waterfowl. However, what I can say is that geese are spawn of the devil, and swans are quite evil as well, so I think we're gonna go duckies. I'm just gonna insert some clips now of all of the Duck of the Day posts from my university, because oh, it's so cute. Grace from GK Reads asks, what is your favourite thing about living in the north from a fellow northerner? So for those of you who don't know, I am from West Yorkshire, born and bred. Love. My parents are originally from Liverpool, but I was born in West Yorkshire and I've pretty much lived in Yorkshire all of my life. Even when I went to university, I just popped over to North Yorkshire, so we're pretty established up here. Though a lot of the time people find it really hard to place my accent in real life, which I'm always a bit confused by. And I find it really funny because especially when I was at university, all of the northerners thought that I was from down south, but then all of the southerners were like, no, you are definitely from up north. But I feel like the more that I hear my accent, especially when I'm editing videos, I'm like, how do you not know where I'm from? I know that my accent isn't as broad as some of my friends, and especially my sister has quite a broad Yorkshire accent, but I always feel like You can surely place me in Yorkshire, right? I definitely feel like the Yorkshire accent and some of the Yorkshire slang definitely is something that I miss when I'm not here. I hate to say it, but it's definitely true that Northerners are a lot more friendly and outgoing than Southerners. Not that that's necessarily an issue for me, because like whenever I'm down in London, I have no problem with the fact that nobody talks to you. You know, I'm definitely an introvert. I like to keep myself to myself, and sometimes when I'm like at the bus stop at home and somebody comes up and starts chatting to me as if I know them, I'm like, what are you doing? So when I do go down to London, I feel very safe in the knowledge that nobody is going to talk to me who I don't know unless they are a tourist. And it has been every single time that somebody has ever spoken to me, it's always been an American tourist. And I'm always just like, who are you? Definitely one of my favourite things about living up north is that every Northerner has some sort of term of endearment that they use. Once again, A-up love. There's a lot of my love, my dear, chuck, chick, babe. Like everybody seems to have one term of endearment that they just use across the board for everybody. And it's weird because I don't necessarily think that I have one, though I do occasionally dabble with my dear for like close friends. All right, my dear. And I use a lot of oh honey and oh sweetie pie with my niece. So, but then she's my niece. She's the cutest person I know, so she gets terms of endearment from me. Then we've got Ben from Doom Antidote who asks, since becoming a YouTuber, has the way that you engage with other YouTube content changed in any way? For example, more or less use of the dislike button or commenting more or less? And I would say, yeah, definitely. I mean, I never used to dislike videos because I just think that's kind of mean, but I definitely like videos a lot more than I used to. I think it's just because I know now that it really helps channels if you like them, and it's just nice to do. I suppose I probably do comment a little bit more than I used to, but I did comment a fair amount when I didn't have a channel. But I feel like especially now I'm seeing a lot more people leaving like little emojis whenever they've watched a video but don't feel like they have much to say about the video, just to leave a little message to say, hey, I'm here, I watched it, I enjoyed. And I really think that's nice. Definitely want to do that a lot more, because sometimes when you post a video and it's been up for a couple of hours and you've had no comments, it can kind of feel like I have just posted it out into the void and nobody cares, but then you get a little comment with an emoji and you're like, oh, somebody's watching. So yeah, I definitely think I'm conscious of wanting other people to know, hey, I'm here, I'm liking, I'm commenting, I care about what you have to say. Nat from Nerdy Nat Reads asks a very important question, which is, what is your favourite dessert? Oh, Nat, you know me well because I am definitely a dessert person, which is not something that my dentist likes about me, but I mean, it's either cake or ice cream. Or ice cream with cake. I'm definitely on a mission to find the perfect white chocolate ice cream, because it's just really hard to find. Like, you don't tend to find white chocolate ice cream in shops. I remember on one of my last days in York, I went to this gelato shop and they had white chocolate ice cream and it was the best thing that I have ever tasted. And when it comes to like a hot dessert, I do love syrup sponge pudding and custard. I've never found a syrup sponge pudding that quite matches the one that I used to get at university, but I'm on a mission, I will find it. Joe asks, what is your favourite quote from a book that inspires you in your everyday life? And this is really hard for me because I'm really bad at remembering book quotes. I mean, I do really like my courage always rises at every attempt to intimidate me from Pride and Prejudice. There's definitely a million Dumbledore quotes that just rattle around my brain at any given time. Berners Bookish Adventures asks, my question is, were you also a lover of reading when you were a child? So yes, I definitely loved reading when I was a child. It was a love of reading that was kind of born out of competitiveness because I always wanted to be the best kid in my class. And of course that included reading. I'm really lucky in that despite the fact that my parents themselves are not massive readers, my mum really wanted to instill a love of books with me and my sister. So she always had reading as part of our daily routine. We used to pick up books from the library every couple of weeks, and she brought us up just being very used to having a book in front of us. And I often hear parents saying, oh, I wish my child liked reading. And I'm always just like, well, do you set that as an example to your child? Because your child definitely copies what you do. And if you do not get a child accustomed to having a book in front of them, then it's kind of hard for that to naturally occur. So yeah, I definitely grew up with a real love of reading as a child, though I wouldn't say I was particularly an adventurous reader. I often tended to read the same things over and over again, and particularly the same authors, so I was a really big fan of Roald Dahl and Jacqueline Wilson. I definitely clung to certain books as comfort blankets, and I often read from example, so if my sister read something, I was kind of keen on reading it myself. If anything, I wish I'd been a little bit more self-guided and a little bit more like keen to adventure outside of my comfort zone. Ed from Gagging for Lit asks, do you miss being a student? I feel like in a lot of ways I do, especially right now. I really miss the routine of being a student. I do miss having like a set goal of something to accomplish, having that kind of motivation of, okay, I've got this much reading to do in a week, I have this essay which is due at this date, because at the moment I don't really have that. I miss having access to the university library, definitely. I really miss like musical theatre society, and I do really miss being around people who are my age. I don't miss the panicky feeling that I used to get when I had a deadline. There are definitely moments when you are writing essays where you just feel like you are so stupid and you will never get it, and I definitely don't miss that feeling. I also do not miss living in student accommodation. I lived on campus for all 4 years of my degrees, and it was interesting. I always went for the cheapest accommodation that I could get just because it cost-wise, I feel like there is really not much difference. It's not worth spending extra money on accommodation unless you are getting like a studio where your kitchen is included. So I always just went for the economy accommodation because it's so cheap. But the downside of that is that you have to share a kitchen with people who are not necessarily as clean as you are. You also have to share a fridge with people who steal your food or who do not let you have your shelf space, and then they'll put their food on your shelf and yeah, I don't miss that. I mean, the next step for me, if I did want to be a student again, would probably be to do a PhD, but I honestly do not think I am smart enough to do a PhD. I think it's only worth doing a PhD if, one, you've got the funds for it, and two, you've got like an actual idea of what you would write for it. And I'm just not at that stage. Ames194 asks, what book started your love of reading? I feel like Harry Potter definitely had a massive contributing factor to me loving reading as a child. However, I can also attribute quite a lot of blame to Matilda by Roald Dahl. Like, having this example of a young girl who just loves reading so much really inspired me, and I would just be like, I want to be like Matilda too. I'll also leave my Booktube newbie tag down below because in that video I pulled out a few of my old childhood books, but like the books that I read when I was a tiny child. Things like Grandad Pot and Bye Bye Baby, which I still love to this day. Katie from Books and Things asks, I'd love to hear more about your dissertation on historical musicals. It sounds fascinating. And thank you, Katie, because it is. So this is definitely something that I am gonna want to go into if I do end up doing that university video. But yes, my master's dissertation was all about the idea of the history musical, and particularly focusing on Hamilton, Six the Musical, and Come From Away. Basically tracking the evolution of the history musical, which I took to be a musical which deals with a specific event that happened in the past or a specific historical person. Basically trying to work out how far that we could say that Hamilton, which came out in 2015, did a lot to change the way that musicals that deal with history have changed. I don't know if that makes sense. So we weren't just focusing on these three musicals, we were also looking at things like Les Mis or Miss Saigon. There are musicals that are kind of set in the past but don't deal with like a specific person or a specific event, so things like Hairspray, which kind of like vaguely deals with the civil rights movement, or like Something Rotten that is vaguely about the Renaissance, didn't count. I was looking at the different ways in which these musicals used, for example, like their primary sources in the musical, the role of spectacle in the musical, so kind of comparing and contrasting like spectacle with writing. So for example, like in the 80s and early 90s, you had like the big mega musical where there was so much spectacle, like the big barricade or the helicopter in Miss Saigon, contrasted with these like newer musicals where the sets are a lot more stripped down. And I was kind of arguing that the reason that these sets are a lot more stripped down, it's so that you focus much more on the writing and the history rather than on the spectacle. Talking about how in these new musicals the whole idea of history and who records history, who gets to write history, is a major theme within these works. Because it's a massive theme within Hamilton and Six the Musical about, you know, who gets to write history, who controls the narrative. And then talking about Come From Away, the way in which the show was compiled of interviews rather than adapting a biography. And I was kind of arguing how the writers of Come From Away became historians in themselves because they went out and they conducted these interviews and then formed it into a show. Their musical became their thesis. I don't know if I've done my dissertation justice, but I feel like it makes more sense on the page. And I got a distinction for it, so woo! Jenny Cook Reads asks, if you went back in time, which useful or luxury item would you take? I would bring a washing machine and mini eggs. What a good choice. I mean, my standard answer to this would be if like I knew I had Wi-Fi and I knew that the battery would stay the same forever, then I would definitely want to bring my laptop because my entire life is on my laptop. I really shouldn't say that because somebody's gonna come and steal my laptop. I'm not sure. I feel like I'd want to bring paracetamol or something like that, like a lifetime supply of paracetamol. But then I feel like washing machine is a pretty good shout because hand washing takes forever. Alison Rose then asks, what classic author do you wish could be brought back to write about contemporary times or issues? I feel maybe because she's very fresh in my mind after Victober, I feel like Elizabeth Gaskell would be a really good choice for this because she's an author who's really good at balancing like romance plots with social commentary. I feel like Elizabeth Gaskell would have a lot to say about the internet. And then a non-bookish question from Alison is, as a kid, what did you want to do for a career when you grew up? Did you ever end up doing any of those things? And if not, would you still want to? So I feel like my career options as a kid were basically batting between singer, writer, and Disney princess. And I feel like as I became a teenager, singer just kind of morphed into musical theatre actress. And in terms of whether or not I've done them, no, not really. I feel like for any musical theatre fan, there's always going to be like a really strong part of like watching performers and being like, oh, I wish I could do that. However, being at university made me realise very quickly, I'm not very comfortable in front of lots of people, and also I can't dance, and you kind of need to be able to do both of those things in order to be a musical theatre performer. The sad thing is, obviously because of COVID, I can't really do amateur dramatics, so I can't even like test the waters that way. Writing was something that really tailed off for me in secondary school. In my head, I feel like I must have a book in me, but It's just not happened yet. I haven't written for fun in a very, very long time. And as for Disney Princess, well, Disney, call me. Light on the Shore asks, can you please share your tips for reading more? I feel like my tips are just going to be very, very generic, so I would just say always make sure that you have a book on you. On public transportation, in the waiting room for an appointment, like just have a book on you. The amount of times that I've seen people like waiting for something and they're like, oh, I'm so bored. And I'm like, well, did you bring a book with you? No. Well, you can't complain about being bored then, can you? I like to listen to audiobooks whilst I am like doing my makeup or doing the washing. I know for some people they find it hard to concentrate on, but for me, I need something occupying my brain whilst I'm doing like a manual task, because otherwise I will just get really bored. Something that I've really been trying to work on is trying not to sub-vocalize when I'm reading. So sub-vocalizing is when you are reading a page and you are kind of like pronouncing in your head every single word. So for example, like if I'm looking at that question, I'd be reading, can you please share your tips for reading more in my head? Whereas there are so many instances in the day where you do so much reading and you don't even register that you're doing it. So for example, like street signs, you are not sub-vocalizing when you're reading like turn left on a sign. Like your brain will just register turn left and you will do it. And I feel like people when they're reading are often like mentally crunching every single word, and you don't need to. So it's not something I'm perfect at, but I'm definitely trying to get better. And also feeling free to DNF things when you're just not enjoying them, because I feel like so many people just try to drag themselves through a book that they're not enjoying, and it just slows your reading pace right down. It's no fun. The final thing is from Kieran at KD Books, and he just says Ulysses/Les Mis read along. So yes, for many a month now, me and Kieran have been talking about reading Ulysses by James Joyce as well as Les Miserables by Victor Hugo. Don't know why I just went on that. And I feel like I'm still not 100% sure how I want to play it, whether or not it's going to be like a group read along where we invite people to do it or not. Do let me know what you think about that, because they are two quite big intimidating books. And I mean, I have read Les Mis before. For me, this is a reread. However, you know, it's gonna take a while. They are very chunky books. Ulysses less so, but it's kind of a bit dense in terms of the writing style. And I don't know, would that be something that people are interested in? Let me know. But yes, whether or not we are buddy reading it or reading along with a lot of you at some point, these two are going to be hit. Anyway, those are all of the questions that I got for this 1K Q&A. We are currently clocking in at 1 hour and 5 minutes. I honestly didn't think I was going to take this long answering these questions. Hopefully I've been able to edit it down into something that is a lot more attainable and enjoyable to watch. But you know, pray for me. Once again, thank you so much for 1,000 subscribers. I'm still kind of baffled that we've got to this point. Like, why would you want to be subscribed to little old me? Do let me know what your answers would have been to some of these questions down in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. I hope you're having a fantastic day, and I look forward to talking to you again soon. Thanks. Bye.